Hello and welcome to The Wizard and the Priestess. My name is Nuala and my co-host
is Matt. Today, what are we talking about, Nuala?
Today we are talking about that all life comes from darkness. What does that mean to you, Matt?
I think it means many things. The first thing that comes to my mind is that's also quite literal.
Literal.
And metaphysical. Mm-hmm. So it's physical and metaphysical, which I think for me would mean it comes to get to something, as in S-U-N, S-U-M, something that you can count. You first have to come from no thing. Not nothing, it's no thing. So it's non-duality into duality. That's the first thing that comes up to me. It comes up for you.
I think from my perspective, the idea that all life comes from darkness first and initially brings me into my own body or into creating life. And that being that, you know, the injection of the sperm into the womb is in complete darkness. And I think that when we look at, the TV screen and it shows us the cilia and it shows us the movement of the sperm moving up through the fallopian tube or, the canal of the woman and then moving in, and then it finds the egg, and then they have this dance together or this conversation, and then the egg decides who comes in and who doesn't. But that all happens in darkness. There is no, the sperm don't have torchlight headlights on or something. They don't know where they're going. I mean, maybe who knows where the future's headed, but they're not needed. And I think that's the point, is that kind of from some ancient text perspective, this idea that human life starts in water, and it starts as water, and then it transforms and transmutes. And that can only happen, and life can only happen or come from that dark place. And so as we bring things into light more, we kind of are disconnecting from the whole cycle of life, where there must be a point where the unknown is the beginning. And that is the way that I look at the 5 elements and look at this water energy being the beginning of all things. It is a place of the unknown.
Okay.
And where the unknown becomes the knowing, just in the way that you said the thing comes from the no thing. And that would be the same way we would, the cycle of life just continues, and there's this lack of, or not lack of, but like this no thing, and then all of a sudden it moves, and then there's this something, this transition being that there is this the unknown. And that being in the water element, which is the unknown. So
the water element represents the unknown?
Yes.
What does the water transform into the known, or how does that work from an Eastern?
Yeah, so then the water transforms into, what is known, or to be what we would say is wood. So that the water transforms into the wood, and that movement expanding outwards.
Yep.
In all directions.
So that's the yin going into the yang.
Yeah, so the fullest yin or expression is then pushing that like black seed that's pushing from the full yang, and then it pushes through.
Yeah, okay.
And the yang is created. Or it's the other way. It's the white seed that is then pushing through the fullest expression of yin, and then that is expressed, and that is when the no thing becomes the something.
Is that creation itself in the Eastern models?
From my perspective, it could be. I think there's also...
I know there's many.
There's many other ways to look at that, but one way we can look at that is as such.
Yeah, okay.
It's not necessarily... but it's like the birth of anything. It's the beginning of any life, any aspect of life. Yeah. And coming back to that idea of not just human, but plant...
Yeah, any life, as you said.
Any life. The womb of the soil, or the womb of the woman, or the womb of the animal, whatever it is.
So when we talk about that then metaphysically, which is beyond or above physical, metaphysical means above physical, they talk about the start of creation, which is infinity itself. Infinity then starts to move. That movement, the more it moves, it becomes energized. As it becomes energized, it becomes intelligent. So now you have infinite intelligence. When that infinite intelligence spirals, it creates what's called sub-logos. so subversions of itself, in order to essentially experience itself, because infinity can't experience itself. But as it's becoming intelligent, it's creating consciousness. But consciousness can't experience itself because it's not a thing, hence the no thing. So the only way for consciousness to know itself is to create the illusion that it's separate from itself to experience itself. But it has to do so unconsciously to learn to get to know itself consciously, which is the paradox that we ultimately call reality. That's what came up from your water to wood chat.
Right. So water to wood is essentially this whole idea of the infinite energy becoming intelligent enough that it wants to experience itself.
Yeah.
And in that
It's
idea,
also the unconscious becoming conscious, symbolically as well.
right. And so then as we move from that, and I'm just trying to understand this. So we're moving from like these levels of, what did you call it? Sublocus?
Well, as it begins to spiral, let's say it spirals upwards, it creates subversions of itself. So,
That's not a thing yet. That's just...
well, it's not what you would call a tangible thing yet.
Okay.
That tangible thing,
Would that sublocus, is that what it's called?
yeah,
Would that be...
locally, technically. Yeah.
Okay. Would that be soul? Is that part of that? Or is the
It would be
infinite
spirit.
intelligent? It's spirit.
Spirit.
Okay.
Spirit, I don't want to use the word breaks up, but spirit expands itself into souls. Those souls then crave the experience, and those souls need to experience certain realities within a certain density, but they need a body to do that.
A human body, or could they be a cat?
They could be a cat, a dog, a plant, a tree, a rock, a human. It's an experience. It's a physical experience.
Okay. And how do they decide?
It's the level of consciousness in which that particular soul is at.
Okay, so I've got spirit moving around this sublocoid, and then I've become really intelligent, and I have split into 7. 7 or 7 billion? Is that where we're at?
Big one.
Okay, so split. And in that splitting, I've got 7 new souls. Yeah. And so then one soul is like, I'm going to experience myself as a cat. And they go in to incarnate. How does that happen?
So let's say you've got 7 souls. You'd have a, let's say, quote unquote, oversoul, right? Which is the higher self of that soul.
The spirit?
Yeah. So,
Spirit is the oversoul?
well, spirit is the animating force behind it all.
Okay.
So if you
The vibration.
kind of like you look at someone and you don't say, oh, there's spirit just there. Hey, spirit, how you going? You look at that person and they've got a lot of energy, a lot of love, a lot of vibration. You say they're spirited. So spirit is looking for that experience to move through you. So we're all tapped into this, whether we like it or not, whether we know it or not. When someone's really tired, they don't have a lot of spirit or life force going through them in that particular moment.
Okay.
When someone's going the opposite, then, and in Christianity, that's Eve.
Eve is spirit.
Eve is spirit.
Okay.
Yeah. So let's say level 1 would be the basic form of that existence. So that would be rock, water, air, fire, metal, space, that kind of stuff.
Okay.
Then consciousness then transcends and includes itself into the next density of experience, which would be what we know of as plant and animal. Then once you've had that experience, that's where spirit or the soul gets to know itself. That's where soul and spirit gets to move in the plant animal kingdom. Then when that soul's ready, it's ready to become aware of itself.
Okay.
That's where we incarnate into a physical body. We're the only
Human
creatures
body.
that we're aware that we're aware. A fish doesn't know it's in water. A dog doesn't know it's a dog. So we have that awareness and consciousness of illusion, that we're separate from this and that. The dog thinks it's just an extension of you. Okay.
Totally.
Then when you've created enough awareness for yourself, then you transcend into love and compassion. So not only do you transcend, you also include from previous incarnations and densities. into self-awareness, aware that you're being aware.
So that could just be human.
Could be human.
So, or like a human, it's going to be a human being. So you move through that density. So so when we bring it back to spirit created this energy, that energy then turned into, infinity.
So I'll say it a different way.
Okay.
Another way of saying yin and yang, the two creations that created the universe, right? Everything's made of that. Think of it as energy and information.
Okay.
When energy becomes informed, it becomes in form. So information means in formation.
Yes.
So it has form.
Okay.
So then it transcends into love and compassion, wisdom and light. And then when you get to the seventh, the highest, quote unquote, oversoul, the higher self, if you will, that's when you can perceive the total unification and conglomeration of all densities into one as an extension of the original infinite intelligence.
Okay, but at that point you probably wouldn't be human anymore, or?
You've transcended that, yeah.
Right. So, okay.
So we'll go back to level 3.
Level 3 is where humans are. And then level 4 is where...
You can still have a human body, but then your consciousness perceives and projects from a place of love and compassion.
Okay, yeah.
So the person that most people think of as Jesus was at that level. But when he was an incarnate, he was actually Yeshua. That's a different podcast.
Okay, so
back to dark.
Back to darkness. So when you consider these in locus spirit aspects, these parts of spirit that have kind of broken up into soul, different formations of soul with different ideas of what they're after and what densities they're going to move into and become.
Different desires, yeah.
How does that happen? Where's the movement there?
Well, the movement is, let's say, in thought form.
In thought?
In thought form. So
And what is thought form?
Well, it's the aspect of consciousness that's tuning into something. The reason... Remember a few episodes back, I said we don't realise what a big deal it is being human.
Yeah.
That rings true here because as humans we have free will, which means we can do anything, anytime, really. We put the limitations of money, we put the limitations of belief. We all do that to ourselves.
Yeah.
Right. Now, someone who is very much stuck in their left brain will say, well, you can't fly. The human body can't fly like Superman. So you could argue that, but it depends on where you want to view that from, left brain or right brain. Now we have both. We become more whole when we integrate the two hemispheres. If you live life just from the left brain, you'll never fly. You picture yourself now flying around.
I am, I'm zooming.
Zooming to there, you just flew.
Right.
Now that part of you is in time-space.
Right.
We are in space-time. It's the time-space aspect of yourself where you get fed the intuitions, the clairvoyances, the clairsentience, all that kind of stuff. What we would call paranormal, or some people call it magic. So that's where that comes from. That's that other part of you that's the unseen versus the seen.
Okay. So when we come back to so it starts at thought, and so we've split into 7 souls in this particular instance, and we have one soul has decided that they are going to go back to experience human form. How do we move from there?
So you have an idea, therefore a thought, a desire, if you will. I want to learn, pick something.
How to garden.
Okay. You want to learn how to garden. So that's your connection to that second density of plant and animal being alive in you still. So you're going to pick parents then who either they're going to provide the necessary polarity for you to give you the opportunity to be drawn into the gardening dream. To the degree that you follow that, you're going to feel alive. You'll be very spirited. The more you go against that, there'll be something not quite right. It'll shake the boat.
Yeah, right.
So then you'll pick the parents and then you'll have that experience.
Yeah, okay. So when we consider this in terms of choosing our parents and so that we can incarnate and live the life that our soul has chosen to experience or to, to experience. And so what does that mean in terms of how we actually come into life and how, the layers of all the things? So, okay, cool, this parent looks good to me. Do I just become their spirit baby? Is that kind of the thing? Like I just hang around with these people and like, or is there something that actually draws me to that? Do I choose that as soul? Do I choose those parents?
So there's many different kind of concepts and theories on that. Personally, I don't quite remember because you go through, in shamanism at least, you drink from the river of forgetfulness, then you forget everything when you incarnate. So you have to relearn everything, hence the soul contracts, etc. Mm-hmm. So at the moment that, I guess you could say the moment of conception, that's when the soul, this is one philosophy, the soul jumps into the womb.
Right.
Others say it jumps in at birth. Others say like a 3, 6 or 9 month. I can't remember exactly which one's which. But essentially during that period, the soul jumps into the body.
The mother's body.
The mother's body, mother's womb, and then grows from that. But there's a deep forgetting about that.
And does their forgetting happen as they jump in or before they do? Like, is it happening in time or is it happening after?
It's happening in time space.
Not space-time, which is where the mother's womb is.
Yep.
Okay. So how do they jump in?
That's essentially the no thing becoming something. Yeah.
How do they get in?
So I'm just going to tackle this from, I think it's a shamanic point of view. At the point of orgasm from the male, picture you're out in darkness, okay?
In the nighttime.
So picture you're just out, pure darkness, as a thought. You don't have a physical body.
Okay.
Okay? Your desires are magnetically drawn to a certain polarity.
Yeah.
Right? And vice versa. So what you want, let's say the male has an orgasm, to you that lights up like a light. And then at the speed of now, because that's the speed of thought, the speed of now, you're there.
So you're in there.
In the womb.
Yeah, okay.
Becoming something.
The sum of the sperm and the egg.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so when we move in that way and we've now chosen this body and I'm going to become a gardener, and I've forgotten everything or I'm on the process of forgetting that I wanted to become a gardener.
No, you had no idea, consciously. But
it's gone.
It's gone. It's not gone. It's just gone into the unconscious.
Okay, so it's consciously gone.
Because you just have this thing where you love gardening.
Okay, so this is my thing that I find really interesting and I'm interested to hear what you think. When it comes to choosing your parents and they are essentially the particular people that have come together to show me the way to become the best gardener that I can be, and I don't know that now because I've forgotten, all things now because I'm moving through. And then I have a really traumatic birth. But that's part of the choosing?
Yeah, absolutely. You need polarity, right? So in order for you to get where you want to go, sometimes you need to learn what you don't want in order to learn what you do want. So if people can't identify their dream, I ask them what their nightmare is. And it's usually just their dream's usually just a 180 degree
flip from that.
Yeah. So if you've had a traumatic birth, that was your soul contract coming in. Some people unconsciously choose to be born blind because when they're born, for example, their contract, it brings people closer together. That was their contract. Makes zero earth logic sense. So if you're listening to this, just rolling your eyes, I get it. But you've got to think beyond human
thought processing.
Yeah.
Or maybe not even human thought processing, but this current carnation of human.
Where we get stuck with everything is we translate everything literally. So translating everything literally, then you can't, if you can't see it, weigh it or measure it, it doesn't exist. But then love, thought, emotion, mind, how do you weigh or measure that? objectively.
I think they're trying to do that.
They're trying to, but they're just not. The human is too complex for that.
Yeah.
So a lot of that is in time-space, which a lot of the powers that be in this world they're trying to dull that down.
The time space, the unconscious.
Or just the soul itself.
Soul.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, and it's really interesting because I guess from my perspective, I bring everything back to the simplistic. So you're where you are taking everything to the depths of complexity. And I think that's maybe why I think I've been drawn to the simplicity of Eastern medicine. And I think there's also an aspect, though, that has been quite dulled down in the way that I learnt initially, TCM, traditional Chinese medicine, and it was definitely the spirit. Like when you look into it more deeply and you kind of understand that there is this depth, this spirituality depth that has been, is like part of the Eastern understanding also, but it was a bit too wishy-washy. And so the complexity of that got dulled down. And so then it became more simplistic and more literal and more capable of actually being digested and understood. Yeah. And I think that's sort of where that idea of all life starts in water form and the chi and the blood connect and become human, because even though chi is quite metaphysical as energy, it's still energy. You can see energy move. Like I'm moving my hand and that's like, it's not just happening. There's energetic energy in that. And we can kind of understand that. We can grasp that because we can see it.
Well, that's for our ego. Our ego wants to make sense of everything.
Right.
So it makes sense of everything easier if it's literal.
Totally.
Yeah.
Because that's the world with which we have perceived and created.
And that's how we're conditioned to think.
Totally.
Yeah.
So it is from that this idea of life starting in darkness. Well, it's sort of that idea of like, well, actually the womb space is just this big dark hole where thought begins. But then how would that infinite energy or that thought even begin?
Well, it comes from infinity itself. It's a part of the original thought.
So it's sort of like I sort of see this idea of like the infinity ring. I don't know whether that has anything to do with this, but I can just see that moving around in some form. Like maybe there's atom, maybe there's no atom. There wouldn't be atom, right? There's no atoms yet. Or is there atoms?
Scientifically, there would be atoms.
Okay, well, let's just say that there's atoms, unseeable, unknowable, but they're moving in this infinity ring and they're moving at that polarity of positive and negative, and that's how they keep popping in different directions. Like that's how they keep creating that infinity ring. And then all of a sudden, like there is in all things, there's that radical or that free radical that moves itself or removes itself from that actual movement of ring. And so I've just curated in my mind this idea that that's what's happening. It's the free radical that breaks off, that becomes a thought, that then becomes the souls, or the spirit that then splits into the souls, that then becomes incarnation. Where are they?
Where are they?
Or where is all of that happening?
All around us.
Right now, here.
Yeah. We're living in the physical manifestation of everything at once.
Right.
Because infinity comes and goes at the speed of now.
Is that why when you were to if you were to use plant medicine and you're able to take yourself to that, like to realm and move into other places, that you're actually finding yourself in this kind of like you're seeing those things?
Well, you're seeing just unconscious aspects of yourself. The thing, if you're on a plant medicine, they disable what we call in the brain the default mode network, is what we know of as the ego. So that filter becomes more permeable, so it allows more things from the unconscious to come up. So we just see those parts of ourselves.
Totally.
So if you're taking plant medicine and see a dragon or spiders all over you, it's just you. But it's so real in that time because you've dissolved the ego for that period.
So you're actually a dragon.
You perceive to be you're either a dragon, it could be attacking you, it could be eating you, you could be eating it, whatever's going on in there. But it's as real as what we perceive to be real now while you're on the medicine.
Yeah, I get that.
And if you haven't had if the ego is not strong enough to handle that upon coming back, you can see how that would really mess someone up.
Absolutely.
So that's a little segue to that. But
the opportune moment to say and suggest that if you are going to consume plant medicine, that you should do that in a safe and reliable sense. Is that what you're wanting to say, Father?
Yeah. Yeah. That might be next episode, maybe.
Anyway, bringing it
That
really.
got weird quick, didn't it?
I don't know. Reeling it back in. Yeah, okay. So I think it's really interesting. So, okay, so there's just infinity ring. Like, is there more than one infinity ring, or is it just that? Because
Well, there's
that's
many infinities, isn't there? There's not just
one.
one thing. I know without getting religious or anything, they
Yeah.
will bring that back to one thing.
Yes. 'Cause
Christians
that's
call
simple.
it God.
Yes.
There's Buddha, there's Muhammad, there's Krishna, there's Ra, there's Source. Whatever your word,
Universe.
you can call it Madonna if you want. Whatever does it for you. It's the same. It's just a concept. That concept.
Singular concept that there is just a singular force.
Well, it's a non-dual. The force hasn't even started yet because it's just that one thought with no polarity.
Oh, hang on. So that's
Because
before my infinity ring start.
Because you can't have the experience as the thought. The thought needs something to think about. Consciousness can't experience itself. Mm-hmm. So consciousness needs to be conscious of something. So it creates the illusion that it is not all there is.
Doesn't that mean then that consciousness can only exist in humans?
No. God, no.
But didn't you just say that
you have
dogs don't understand? They aren't aware of their awareness?
Doesn't mean they don't have consciousness.
Oh, okay, right. Because they're conscious enough to say, oh, there's my owner and I can go to that. Okay, I got it. Yeah. All right, so hang on. Now we got to go one step further and be like, so where's the eternal thought? Where does it start?
Well, there is no start, there is no beginning. Sorry, no beginning, no end. That's the paradox of it.
Okay, so that we're coming into like quantum physics ideologies.
So the whole thing is that we're an expansion of that original thought. And that original thought is creation.
Right, and so we're all one from the same cloth.
Same cloth?
Dark cloth.
Dark cloth. And then we go into the womb.
And then we move into the womb. Yeah, okay. Yeah, it's really interesting because then there is this idea. So we have in Chinese medicine, which I think I want to touch on another time in terms of like the soul, like the different souls. Each organ has a different soul and has a different function in that way.
Oh, each organ has a different soul.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Or a different spiritual aspect.
Yeah, okay.
But the main spiritual aspect we talk about is the Shen, because that's the heart.
Okay.
And there's a few different chains of thought that I've kind of come across in recent years of study, and that has been that the Shen has been seen as the main because it is the heart center, and the heart center is seen as, or the heart itself is seen as the emperor. And in, traditional Chinese monarchy, or I don't think it's called a monarchy, but either way, it is, the emperor was the person in charge, but there is the above the emperor.
Sure.
And so that's when, or like the idea that the emperor is not the main, they're not the center. What the center is the heaven and earth, which is the creator of life. Okay. But it's like, it kind of gets messy. And so you sort of, as a really simple clinician that likes things really simple, I sort of tend to steer clear of when it gets a bit messy. And that is actually really common in a Western model because we like things simple and clear. However, when you go deep into Western medical model, it is not simple and clear. And there's like, they make out that things are simple and clear, but they're definitely not simple and clear. So either way, from that perspective for myself is that I find that I'm falling more into this idea of the simplicity of this is transferring into this is moving into that, and that becomes really, just really quite simple in that sense, and it's easy to understand.
So when you
grasp.
say this turns into that and that turns into this,
I'm talking about.
Are you referring to like yin can only ever turn into yang and vice versa? That kind of yin to yang
kind of movement, or I'm more talking about 5 elemental movement, which is yin to yang every part of it.
Just on a different scale.
It's just different cycle.
Yeah.
Everything is cyclical.
Yeah.
Everything is moving in that way.
Yeah.
So whether it's within the actual, water itself, moving from its yin aspect to its yang aspect, which then transforms and transmutes. But if you're looking at the whole 5 elements, well, you see the yin and the yang of the whole 5 elements. And then you can zoom out a little bit further and you see a human life of 100 years and you see the yin and the yang of that whole cycle. Or we look at, the male cycle being the 24-hour yin and yang cycle. Or you look at the female cycle, which is more of the 28, 29-day cycle. We look at the yearly cycle, the 365-day, which we've kind of created, but more like the seasonal cycle.
Yeah.
And so everything is yin and yang, and depending on where you look at it, like if you were to look at a diagram, you would see like the minuscule yin and yang just spinning around, but then within every cog there's yin and yang movement, which is within the whole big yin and yang.
Yeah.
So it's just like smaller and bigger, and I would say that once you get to that pinpoint of the non-duality, that point of thought that you're touching on, it might be
But the paradox of that is that there's no words to describe it,
the center.
because as soon as you use...
The center.
I'm not saying it.
I described the word.
As soon as you go to that non-dualism,
Yeah.
as soon as you have words, that's the polarity.
Okay.
So you go to a place of no polarity, all pure potential. So whatever...
Pure potentiality. I remember that.
So whatever you want to be, whatever you can be,
Yes.
you have the potential to become.
And do we have that now? How long do I have to think about it? We've played this game before.
We have. Right now you have 4.1 seconds.
4.1 seconds.
She's thinking. What is it? What have you got?
What can you not see?
I can.
What do you see, Matt?
I can't say it on this show. I don't know. Are we allowed to swear?
I mean swearing? I don't know what you're talking about.
Fuck yeah, let's do it. Yep.
Oh, look at this. You're a naughty boy, Matt. Anyway, I was coming back to that idea of the 3 hun and the 7 po in a kind of spiritual context of the soul itself. So as it carnates, it has the 3 hun, the 3 gentlemen, and the 7 po.
Okay.
And so it's kind of like where you would say soul, that would be, those guys would be in part of that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, elaborate more.
So, for example, soul has 3 hun and 7 po.
What's hun?
Hun are the 3 gentlemen. So, like the kind of things that you want. You kind of want your, like, loyalty and
so the aspects
joy,
of
the aspects of soul.
And the other?
The po
Yeah.
are the kind of dark. So you've got
So would you say you got 3 light, 3 shadow?
No, it's 3 and 7.
Sorry, that's what I meant.
3 and 7.
Yeah. Okay. So you got 3 light, 7 shadow.
Yes. And so what a teacher or someone who I've learnt under has described or spoken of is that when you have these, this is you. You are that. You have these 3 gentlemen or these 3 kind of steadfast, people to look up to and connect to and feel connected with, and to be like, they're all like, the kind of seen as the positive or the light aspects of yourself. And then you have the 7 po, which could be, like anything from envy to jealousy to like that.
What most would correlate to negative attributes type thing.
Totally.
Yeah.
So, and then obviously every soul is incarnated differently. So you have the different 3 and 7.
Yeah, okay.
But it's like, it's seen as a negative thing, this darkness. And one of the things that was definitely, that I felt was really clearly kind of, or drilled in a little bit, was about that it's not, just because it's dark, it's not necessarily bad. And we all started from darkness. And if we think to what you're describing of this idea of like kind of going round and round and round and round and round. And for me, I'm trying to pinpoint the unnameable point. The center.
Well, then if you're explaining the center...
It's not the center.
The center's right here and now.
Right, because I am the center of my own universe, so that is me.
Well, have you looked up the definition of the center of the universe?
Me.
It's like exactly
It's me.
anywhere you are.
Yeah, it's I am.
Just you.
It's me.
Yes.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's like...
Thanks for listening, ladies and gentlemen.
the priestess, the center of the universe. Yes. No, my universe, obviously. But so either way, it's just like this kind of reminder that you cannot have the light without the dark. You must have the dark because the dark creates all of you.
Well, without the dark, you wouldn't see the light, because if it's all light, there's no polarity to have that experience of dark.
Totally. And I just see shadow in your head and I'm like, oh, I see the polarity.
You can see my shadow.
There's your shadow.
Yeah.
Right
Behind
there.
me, right there.
Right there.
Yeah.
It's next to you, Matt. Just be mindful. You're moving very, very slowly there. So, no, it is really interesting because it is this idea that we are afraid of our dark, or we work so hard to remove ourselves from the dark. And I think, or at least like,
I think society also helps us out to be not scared of the dark, maybe scared of the dark, but also to ignore the dark, to be scared of it, to run away from it, all these things.
And I would say to some extent, like I have a little child, and so whenever I look at whatever's coming up for her, I'm mindful of what I may have like put onto her and feared her in some way. But she's a bit scared of the dark, and she's scared of being alone in the dark.
I have adult patients who are
afraid of the dark.
Scared of the dark,
Yeah. And I remember being afraid of the dark, but there's aspects to that I'm like, well, I remember why I was afraid of the dark. Whereas for her, I'm mindful of like, oh, okay, that is interesting. Okay, I'm open to hearing you in this, and even anything that my children say, obviously with the fact that I am their parent and I am, if they've forgotten that they are soul, and so they have forgotten all the actual individual aspects of themselves.
But it'd be interesting to listen to them because they haven't been conditioned.
Well, this is my point, is that they have sort of been conditioned because, I mean, my 4-year-old's been here for 4 years and I've definitely been conditioning her in whatever way I've been conditioning her, like we all are. Yeah. Obviously, I'm hoping that it's the best conditioning for her, but, I mean, if she wants to be a gardener, potentially, but if she wants to be an astronaut, probably not.
Not with attitude.
Well, I just haven't been conditioning her in these ways that, that like... Anyway, my point is that like when she tells me that she's afraid of the dark, it makes me think that I haven't conditioned her, right? So this is where I'm moving from. Yep. And this idea that she's just a little child that is afraid of the dark, and darkness, it starts as a place. I mean, it mightn't start that way, but it's interesting because in TCM and the model of the 5 elements that I'm always moving from, the water element is related to kidney. And its process or its function is to identify danger. And so when it is out of balance, it is fearful. So that it sort of makes sense in that way that the darkness is feared. And therefore, but mainly when it's out of balance, there is fear. Sure. But its function is to identify danger. So if your function of your water element is working well, you identify danger, you become aware of that, and you move from that and you grow into the beginning of who you are. Yeah. And so, and then you grow into that part and you understand your boundaries, where you start, where you finish, where you're physically capable, where you, where you're physically at. And so I think that's quite interesting because it's like that is the emotion that she is showing in terms in relation to the darkness of the unknown. And then we're trying to talk about, for a time we've been talking about monsters, and she's been really afraid of monsters. And I remember a patient of mine telling me once that her, what did she say? Her mum said to her, the monsters aren't real, they're just in your head. And that freaked her even more out. Yeah. Because then she's got these monsters in her head.
Monsters in her head.
And every time she closes her eyes at night, she's freaked out because the monsters are in her head. Yeah. And I was like, it's funny because it's quite, I imagine, a common catchphrase to say as a parent to a child that like, oh, don't worry, they're not real, they're just in your head. Like it's, I get it makes perfect sense, but actually think of receiving that as a child, you're like, well, now I've got all these monsters.
You literally wear that and you believe it.
In my head.
Soul. Yeah.
Totally. Yeah. And so I'm just really conscious to say monsters aren't real. And if they happen to exist, then you just tell them to go away. And I mean, I've had my own experience with seeing monsters and having to tell them to get nicked. But it is like, it is really, it's really cool having kid like in this experience and being like, oh, wow, okay, I see that. And I can see you expressing that now and just being like really conscious of like an awareness of not trying to, push in a certain way, and being aware of, I mean, she's absolutely being conditioned in many different ways, but it's being kind of aware of what is coming up for her and how she's expressing that is this idea of like, she's only really little, but obviously that's crazy too, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, that's in Freudian and Jungian psychology. They talk about the shadow, but they're the light and shadow attributes of an archetype.
Right.
And the shadow is there. The shadow is essentially the unconscious aspect of yourself you don't want to acknowledge because of that story gap we spoke about last time, where the story yourself, the story between you and you is different to the story that you tell the world.
Yes.
You create that shadow.
Yeah.
And that shadow is the unconscious aspect of yourself that you don't want to look at.
Yes.
Hence it's in the shadow.
Yes.
But it is there to serve you.
Yeah.
To say, look, you're being victimized here. Or, you're selling yourself short, or whatever the situation might be.
Yeah, totally.
So it is there to serve you. I think, as you just said, from the monsters in your head, that activates that part of the memory of, well, I'm being kind of warned about something here. That's where the monsters live. So therefore, my concept of that thing now is now a monster. So we would have used the word monsters way back in the day to describe something, because we used to talk in symbology and mythology. We used to talk in story, and those stories today have been interpreted literally.
Yes.
And I, for one, don't really think it's going that well.
Mythology, or literal translation,
interpretations of
right.
the
Of
Bible
mythology.
as an example. That's
Right.
another discussion in itself. But yeah, telling a child that those monsters are in your head, even though the intentions might be very pure, it's the kid wears that
as a real
every
literal
fibre of their being.
Yeah. I mean, being a parent is pretty full on, especially when you think of think of that kind of, the soul chose, right? So the pressure's off. We'll be right. They'll be
Soul's
right.
right,
Soul's got it. But
energy can't die. And it's also funny that you were talking about being afraid of the dark.
Oh, yeah.
Because what that really is symbolically is fear of death.
Yeah,
Also fear of silence and the fear of being alone. That all represents fear of death.
Yeah, and it is really interesting because fear of death is essentially the underlying everything. We're all so afraid of dying.
The ultimate, in this incarnation, the ultimate unknowing.
Yes. So life and death come from darkness.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Well, I would say, a lot of people would say that life and death are opposites. For me, birth and death are opposites. Life just is.
Yeah, okay, yeah. Yeah, I think that's just a bit of play on words.
And they need each other.
Birth and death, or life and
Without death, there'd be no life. I think we just need to be more comfortable with that. I think the more we get stuck in TV shows and news programs and all that kind of stuff, we lose the magical awe of really the magic that creates every moment. And it really is all around us. But let's just say there's a reason they call it TV programming.
So I've already thrown the TV away. So
Good start.
starting. Although I do have a computer.
So essentially you've thrown the real monsters away. Good.
The real monsters are gone.
Good.
No, but they're still there. They're still very much living within me, within my soul and my head. But yeah, it is.
Next week we're going to talk about exorcism.
Exorcism, yeah, and how to actually get those monsters out of your head. Yes. I was trying to think of one more thing that I was wanting to touch on here, but I guess it's just that idea, coming back again, that everything in our reality is dualistic. So from my perspective, life comes from darkness. It moves from the darkness into the light. However, along with that is the darkness and the light, just like yin and yang. It is forever like that. There will forever be the light and the dark. And we can choose to work with them or against the dark, essentially. And I think that's one of those whole ideas of, the priestess and the witch and the witches and all of those things, this what was seen as darkness in times gone by, and the wizard, was seen as darkness. And we sit here today and it's light. I only see light. And in saying that, like, we're going into, in and out of the light and dark, but it is this idea of we need the polarity and we maintain the polarity, but I think there's been enough darkness in terms of wizardry and witchery and priestessing and priests and all those things in the form that I'm talking of.
I think for me, with let's say the wizard and the priestess archetypes, there is always the potentiation of light and shadow at any given moment.
Yes.
But the free will of the individual determines whether they choose the light or the shadow.
Right.
Usually, and there are exceptions to this, usually when you choose the light, you feel lighter. It's usually coming from a place of love, so it's sustainable. Mm-hmm. So that's when you use love as the fuel and spirit flows through you.
Right.
To do that certain task or be that
like
person.
As I became the gardener.
Yep.
Or that soul, particular soul. Right, yep. Okay, so even though the darkness is there to serve you, by choosing it, it's probably not going to necessarily propel you in a light direction.
Well, I don't think it'll probably create more confusion. And what I mean by that is, for example, every villain thinks they're a hero in their own mind. So there are certain figures in this world who people think they're heroic. And I couldn't think more opposite.
Example?
Well, Bill Gates is one.
Okay.
Everyone thinks he's a hero and he's amazing. I think he's very confused. Going above, I think he's he's great at making money, credit where it's due. But spiritually, if you look at him spiritually, he's just torn into shreds. So for me, that's just a confused entity.
Yes.
It's the when we say follow your path.
Oh, yeah.
The path of least resistance.
Right.
That's normally the light attribute. Yet if we had Bill Gates right here, he could probably sit down and speak from the heart and genuinely feel that he's doing the best for humanity. So that's where that quote would come in handy. So he's genuinely thinking he's doing good or light work for the world. I would just see that very different.
Yeah, right. Your perception of that is different.
So we all perceive differently.
Oh, absolutely. That's that's what we come in here to as well.
That's what we come here to experience.
Yeah. Yeah, cool. Well, I'm ready to sign out. You got any last words, Matt?
I think I've done most of the talking today. This is a bit unusual for this.
Well, it was your time to shine, doll.
Which is ironic, coming from the shadow.
Well, we're moving from light to dark all the time.
That's it.
I just wanted to spend this last few moments to thank our editor, Paris. Paris, we are so grateful to have you on board, and thank you for making us sound a little bit better than we do.
Thank you, Paris. See you guys.
Signing out.
You've been listening to The Wizard and the Priestess. Thanks for stopping by. Stay connected and be open.